I have declared war against my brain in order to save my mind. The battle wounds don't seem to bother me so long as I know they will heal with time. And the scars remind me to appreciate the days I don't have to.
I was in Hollywood last night, and you could not go 2 blocks on Sunset or Hollywood Boulevard without seeing the Michael Bay thing, the new what do you call it? His big franchise, Michael Bay's.
The Transformers.
The Transformers. I mean, it was
Transformer.
fucking everywhere.
I saw that too, animated.
Yeah, I know. It's just everywhere, man. It was
Really?
everywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I noticed. I saw, like, I'd been thinking for a while. When's George Clooney going to do another movie? When's George Clooney going to do another movie? And then he's got a big ad up there on Sunset or Hollywood Boulevard. So I guess he's doing
that the
something.
one
Do you know
he
what
did
it
with
is,
Brad
Adam?
Pitt?
Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's that Brad Pitt movie, right?
The Transformers.
Not Transformers. No, I'm talking about now about
The George Clooney, Brad Pitt thing.
Oh,
What is that?
That's about 2 lone wolves get thrown together on one last heist. That's why it's called Wolves
Okay.
instead of Wolves.
Okay.
And it's can these 2 lone wolves work together? And that's all I know about it.
Okay.
And they got paid a ton of money, $35 million each for it, and it's not going to have any theatrical run, from what I understood.
Well, yeah.
So-
Looked to me like it was. It was going to one of the platforms. One of the hundreds and hundreds of platforms that are out there. Jim? Why don't you talk a little bit about how you met Adam, and then we can talk about how I know Adam and how we kind of started talking.
I met Adam in the mid-'90s, early '90s, when I left the H.N. Swanson agency when it got sold, and my screenwriter friend John Norville was a client of Lee Cohen at William Morris, and John said, "Hey, why don't you give Lee a call, and there's a chance you could do some reading over there for William Morris." And I had quite a bit of experience in reading books and screenplays and writing coverage of them from ICM days. So I called over there. I went to meet Adam, and he gave me a script to read, and I went home and read it and wrote glowing coverage of it. Of course, it was one that he had written and changed the name on, so I passed the test.
Yeah.
So that's how I met Adam, and I started reading for him and read for him for a couple of years. And Adam, this was in the early '90s, and Adam had been at William Morris already for probably 4 to 5 years, and he's still there today, which makes him definitely one of the longest termed film executives in Hollywood these days to be at the same company for that long, for close to 35 years now. It's hard to see people who stick around that long. I think there's one other agent at William Morris who's been there as long, and that's it. So
who's that?
Mike Simpson.
Oh, Mike Simpson. Yeah. Jim told me that you have some connections with Ed L'Amato, and you remember Ed, and Ed and I were as close as I was with my father, and we were really, really close. And although, he handled Mel Gibson at the time, he handled Richard Gere, he handled Michelle Pfeiffer, he handled Denzel.
Yeah,
he handled a lot of people. And maybe all his clients feel that way, but I always felt like I was like his, I used to go over there, once a month and stay over there all night long partying with him. So I'm not sure he did that with Michelle Pfeiffer.
Did L'Amato have an aquarium in his office?
No. Not that I remember. No, not that I remember. I mean, might have. I mean, I was with him for so long that we would bounce from William Morris to ICM, back to William Morris, ICM. I didn't. What was your connection with him?
I was telling Jim that when I started in 1989 at William Morris, I was still in film school, and an agent I knew said to me, "You should be a reader. Screenplays are the currency of the business." And at
You
the
were
time,
in school for what reason?
I was a screenwriting major.
You were
an undergraduate screenwriting major
at USC.
At USC, class of
I believe,
1990.
Adam, weren't you one of only 2 students who actually sold a screenplay?
Yeah, there was
And
24
the other
kids
was-
in my class, and the two students who sold their senior thesis, I had sold mine a horror script called Conversations with a Cannibal to a foreign sales outfit called Overseas Film Group.
Okay.
The other classmate sold his senior thesis to Columbia, and
got
it
it.
was called Boys in the Hood.
Ah.
And so John Singleton and I knew we had arrived when everyone in our class wanted us dead.
They were
And
very jealous
when
of you.
our
huh?
senior year, we got to actually act in our senior thesis scripts. We would take a video camera and slap in a VHS tape, and we would crew.
John
films.
Singleton got to carry his script around in a CAA cover.
That's true. That's
And
true.
rub it in on
what,
the other
what
students,
made us
yeah.
special was that John and I would sort of took that momentum of early success in film school.
Yep. Yeah.
When
yeah.
we left and our life no longer ran in semesters.
Yeah.
And Michael, what I realized is that my gift was not my own screenwriting, but that what I was good at was recognizing the greatness of other people's screenplays.
Okay.
And so when I became a script reader in the summer of '89,
For
William Morris,
okay.
William Morris,
Okay.
and at $20 a script, my internship was arranged to be from June to August, June 15th, August 15th, at $20 a script. And because they had me, this workhorse who had never done it before and was learning as I did it, I became quickly a sort of popular reader among the agents. I want Novak to read for me.
Right.
The head of the store department then
Right.
would assign a script, and I would do a log line, a summary, and an evaluation of script coverage. And for some reason, over the summer, Clint Eastwood's agent, Lenny Hershan, had also signed Charlie Sheen. And through the sheer dumb luck of the pile,
that movie.
I started reading scripts for Lenny Hershan all summer. And the one that I loved was this script called The Rookie.
Yeah.
And I was very Machiavellian at that age, 21. I made a point of printing out my reader report and slipping it in the screenplay and personally returning the screenplay to agents' offices on the first and second floor at William Morris on El Camino.
Yeah.
And so Lenny Hershan was famously answered his own phones, and there was no assistant that day. And I returned the script of The Rookie to Lenny Hershan, and he goes, "So you like the script for Charlie?" Huh? I said, "I love it."
Right.
What do you think about the other part? Because it's even better. He said, "Well, Charlie read the script last night. He's doing it. Clint is starring, producing, and directing this for Warner Brothers. I got another script for you to read for Charlie." And I said, "Lenny, my last week, I got to go back to my senior year at film school."
Yeah.
And Lenny said, "That doesn't help me.
Right. Yeah.
You read for Charlie now. And you read for Clint. I want you to keep reading for me." I said, "Okay, but my internship is over." And he said, I got this." And so I went up to the second floor to see the head of the store department at William Morris. And he gets off the phone with Lenny Hershan, looks at me standing in his office, and says, "I hear I hired you."
Wow. Wow.
So when
Wow.
I say John,
How old were you?
I was 21.
Wow.
And
Wow.
at that time, Lenny had some clout because he was at that time the head of the motion picture department.
Yeah.
And he was in Stan Kamen's office on the first floor in the corner, and Stan Kamen is famous.
Wasn't Stan Kamen in New York?
No, Beverly Hills. And
Okay. Who am I thinking
when
of?
he died.
Okay.
Maybe
Sam
Sam
Cohn.
Cohn.
Sam Cohn, yeah.
Sam
okay,
Cohn.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Same legend, same
yeah,
ilk.
Yeah.
And so to have Lenny Hershan, a champion, be my first mentor
Yeah.
in the business
Yeah.
as a reader,
Yes.
soon led to other agents in the motion picture department saying, "I like the way you write. Will you read for this movie star? Will you read for this client?" And Michael, the moment I knew I had sort of not made it, but that I was really good at what I was doing, that I could feel confident about having an opinion about a screenplay, was when I read a script for the agent for Kevin Reynolds at the time. And I, again, before the email.
Kevin
before
Costner's partner,
Yeah, Kevin Reynolds.
hate-love
Yeah,
relationship.
totally, that guy.
Yeah,
and I walked into Mike Simpson's office at 91 or 90, and I was still the freelance reader.
Yeah.
I wasn't in-house yet.
Okay.
And I threw the script on Mike Simpson's desk with my coverage inside, and I said, "I just read the best script for Kevin Reynolds. It's Mad Max on water."
Uh-oh.
No, what I learned was is that anyone who read that script, it was a wild script. Whatever I had read that month or that
What
week,
was the name of it?
Waterworld.
Waterworld, thank you.
And funny enough, Peter Rader, the screenwriter of that movie, I Googled him online a couple of years ago. And while he's never been produced since, he did later write novels. So for him, maybe he found that screenwriting was for the birds, or maybe his experience was so unpleasant and negative for him. But the point is, you read a good script. You read a script that stood out for you. What do you do with that script? How do you get other people to read it? And what I learned then, and it's true today, is that a reader only has the power to get someone else to read it. That's it.
Yeah,
I'm not making these movies. I'm not budgeting them. I'm not telling them. I'm not on a green light committee. But at the agency, I have been the in-house reader there since 1989. Mm-hmm. And other people have come and gone, and agents have left. But the fact that I am the material guy in a material business,
in a material world,
exactly, is maybe the reason for my longevity.
Yeah.
And the fact that nobody wants my job.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Adam just recently was asked to come up with a list of 20 comedy scripts, available comedy scripts that they could send to one of their clients who's looking to direct a comedy script.
I didn't know they were making comedies anymore.
Well, you wouldn't think, but Adam would know that there are 20, available comedy properties out there. He's got an incredible database of available properties of things he's read. Adam and I were speculating one time that if the Guinness Book of World Records people had a category for who's read the most screenplays in Hollywood, probably Adam would fit that.
Do you have to read the Marvel scripts? Or do you get to read the Marvel scripts? I don't know how
almost never. Almost never.
Do you find, Adam, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all the independent work, all the independents, it seems to me there would be less to read these days. When I go to the movie theaters now, 9 times out of 10, what is playing is a Marvel movie and children's movies, and every once in a while, something else might slip in. Is there less material? Are you reading? But you're reading for streaming. You're reading for everything. You're not just films. Obviously,
nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. Yeah.
I'm reading a script for Netflix.
Amazon, yeah.
It is endless.
Yeah.
If I'm reading 2-3 scripts a day, I'm not feeling any change.
Do you read 3 scripts a day and do coverage on them, and you do that one day?
Of course.
Wow, that's okay. That's a lot of work.
If I did the math, I tell people Sunday is a work day for me. I've done 4 scripts on Sundays, but the next day on Monday, that's my Sunday.
Okay.
So Monday is Sunday, and Sunday is a work day. A weekend read.
I'm getting confused.
And it's just a matter of I have 4 scripts to read, and what is my point of view about each one? Who am I reading it for?
That's a big factor right there. Who are you reading it for, and what do they need it for? Do they need it to maybe
I'm
send to
I'm
their
just
client?
contributing to my point of view to the process. I don't have a vote. I have a voice.
Right. And do you so what 25 years? 30 what 35 years. Okay. So can you talk about some of the scripts that you read for clients 10 and 20 years ago, and ones that really worked and ones that didn't work, and ones that you were very proud that because of you, maybe these movies were,
There was my favorite story is James Cameron had this script.
Who?
James Cameron.
I never heard of him, but go ahead.
Indie filmmaker. And I had to read a script called Titanic for an agent who represented Kate Winslet. And this screenplay was, I got the call in the morning.
Had you ever read anything from Jim before?
I had actually read his Spider-Man
Yeah.
when it was 21st century
He had a role for me in that. Not Spider-Man, but another. There's some.
I swear it was a treatment. It wasn't a script.
Okay.
And I've been that I even remember that this was James Cameron Spider-Man for Menachem Golan. It was like a canon film things. I think.
Wow.
And so anyway, I get this call and they said we want you to read the script for Kate Winslet for a script called Titanic. And the limousine is coming to drop it off at William Morris at 10 a.m. and they're coming by to pick it up at 5. So it's got to be done today and do the coverage on this thing and proceed accordingly. And so I treated it like any other script, although there was a same-day request. And when I read that 185-page half script, half treatment, I saw that the part of Rose was as dimensional as Jack, that she was not the human handbag to the lead. She wasn't the love interest. She wasn't the girlfriend. That Rose was feisty and interesting.
Yes,
and I wrote in my evaluation after I did the summary for the agent that if they get this right, this could be a love story for the ages.
Yeah,
and it's very specific what I do. I know exactly who I'm reading it for.
Yeah.
So if I'm reading Good Will Hunting with the director Gus Van Sant,
did you?
Absolutely.
Right.
And that was a script that, again, when I finished it, my hair was on fire. I tried to write an evaluation in such a way that would encourage the agent to send the screenplay to Portland so that the director-client would read it, know that it was offered to him to direct, and that if he liked it or wanted to direct it, the agency is doing their job.
Right.
And my job is in some ways to be the goalie. I keep things out.
Right.
But it's what I think you might appreciate reading the script, even if I like a script or I think the script is worth reading, and the client doesn't do it. If the client appreciates being sent interesting material, then it's above my pay grade to make anyone do a movie. Yeah. But if I'm doing my job right and I'm recommending that you read the script and it's intriguing, but the client can say, I don't want to play a cop.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a fighter. I want to,
It's all I ever play, cop or a fighter, but,
there was the first time.
Or an insane person.
The first time I ever realized that I had clout in the halls of the agency. In other words, if I thought something was good, agents would read it and they would send it to their clients. Was there was a screenplay written by the director Donald Campbell and his wife, and it was called Wild Side. And I liked the script so much, the agent said, take them out to lunch. And so I took them out to lunch, and they said, we really want Christopher Walken to play the lead in our script. And I said, Brian Gersh is his agent. He loves me. I'll give the script to Christopher Walken. So with no offer, no financing in place, just a script, Brian Gersh sent the script to Christopher Walken in New Haven, where he was at Yale directing a play about Elvis and starring and directing a play about Elvis. And a month later, Donald and Sheena called me and said, we're having lunch with Chris at the Chateau. What happened? I said, well, he must have read the script. And then Christopher Walken and Donald said, we want Joan Chen to play his wife in the script. And I said, who's her agent? And he goes, Joan Hyler. And I said, Joan loves me. So I walked into Joan Hyler's office and talked about the script. And she goes, I just had lunch with Joan Chen. She just asked me. She wants to play a lesbian. And the script involved this
I've always wanted to play a lesbian, too.
As soon as you said, that's why I thought of it when you talked about cops and boxes. And now the opportunity to play a lesbian. Joan Chen reads the script and says yes. And long story short, this amazing screenplay with Money Launderer.
What's it called?
Called The Wild Side. Wild Side. Okay. And the last actor they wanted was Stephen Bauer. And Stephen Bauer was represented by Glenn Wigberg. And again...
Is this back in the day of the Pacino movie when Stephen Bauer was coming
after Scarface.
Years after
Scarface. And they wanted Stephen Bauer to play the undercover treasury agent who's after Bruno Buckingham, this money launderer whose ex-wife...
Could they find him?
Stephen Bauer read the script, and he said, I want to play this treasury
How'd that
agent.
go?
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
The movie got made when the 3 leads were cast internally. And I said, well, this must be what packaging is like. This is when you have all these assets, and it just takes a script like flypaper, and then we have the director's chair filled. Donald was going to direct his script that he wrote with his wife, and the movie's sensational. If you want to see a wild movie, and it's mid-90s.
Who directed?
Donald Campbell.
He
directed Performance.
Yes.
With Mick Jagger in the late 60s. Wild movie. And that was an experience where it all sort of came together very quickly, and I recognized that doing coverage is part and parcel of the job, but the ability to champion something and start thinking, well, if it's not good for so and so, maybe it's good for another person.
You've had dinner with Mick Jagger, right?
I was going to say
unbelievable
time. Postscript to this story when Don, this director, called up Adam. He and his wife called up Adam one time and said, "Hey, join us for dinner. There's going to be a fourth," and and he didn't know he was going to be dining with Mick Jagger until he got there. And then he said that for most of the dinner, Mick and Don talked about English football, but at one point he got to say to Mick, "Hey, could you pass the bread?" Something like that, and was able to mention that Mick Jagger's company had just optioned a book written by his uncle. Isn't that right, Adam?
Yeah.
Your uncle?
Yeah.
Your uncle had written a book?
My father's sister's husband had written a novel about Anton Mesmer, the famous hypnotist, and it was called The Strange Case of Mademoiselle P. And what do I have to say to Mick Jagger? I mean, Mick Jagger asked me to pass him the bread basket at Les Deux Cafés. I mean, we're at Michel Lamai's restaurant in Hollywood, and I just can't believe I'm sitting next to Mick Jagger, and all he and Donald were talking about was, Manchester United versus Liverpool.
Yes,
and I just
which you knew nothing about, right?
Just leaning in and talking to China, and I handed Mick Jagger asked me to pass him the bread, and that's when I held on to the bread basket. I held it, so the two of us are holding the bread basket.
So he'd look at
I
you?
mentioned my uncle's novel, and Donald got very excited, and Mick said, "You guys should adapt the book. Donald, you should direct it." So in the morning, I called my parents, and my mom answered the phone, and I said, "Mom, you're not going to believe this. Last night I had dinner with Mick Jagger," and Mom said, "Yeah, right. And you're having breakfast with Keith."
Right. I had an experience with Mick Jagger, and hopefully I probably said this before, maybe, but I was at the Four Seasons, okay, on what's it?
Doheny?
Yeah, Doheny. I was on Doheny. I used to spend a lot of time at the Four Seasons when things weren't going well with my wife, and she was mad at me, and my girlfriend was very upset at the same time. They both wanted me out of the houses that I bought for them. I'd always end up at the Four Seasons there, which I liked a lot. But anyway, I ran into him, and I always ask people, out of all, the bar, the pool, this, to that, out of everywhere, where do you think I ran into Mick Jagger? The gym. Yeah, he was in the gym. Working out, doing, working on his legs or whatever like that. And that's why he's still probably jumping around at 80
years old, 83,
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how I met you. I met you, of course, through. How'd you? I met you a little bit through Jim when Jim and I were interested in doing the story about Timmy Colseri and Full Metal Jacket. Call it Full Metal Straightjacket. Go ahead, Jim.
You asked me, Michael, if I knew anything about how to get a magazine article generated, and I said, my usual default answer is, let me ask Adam.
Yes.
I know. Yeah. I'll ask Adam.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that a lot.
Adam said, well, maybe if you put together a proposal or something, I could send it off to the William Morris publishing agents back in New York, and they have clients who, write magazine articles, etc. So we wrote this, page and a half piece about your friend Tim Colseri. And do you want to talk a little bit about Timmy, how you met Timmy, and what the basic?
No, we've had Timmy's been on the podcast, and I wanted to document what Jim and I wrote in Full Metal Straightjacket. I wanted that documented. I wanted that coming out of his mouth, and I wanted to hear about Kubrick, and it's a very, very, very enjoyable podcast.
What I remember about that time was what you sent me was almost like a first draft of a screenplay.
Well, it was a page and a half, and you said it was about Tim Colseri being cast to play the drill instructor in Full Metal Jacket, and then right when he was about to start performing, having that role yanked out from under him, and he got the role of the door gunner instead. And we sent you about a page and a half proposal, and you said, "Gosh, at the end of the day, this is a story about an actor getting cut from a movie. There's nothing really special about that." And I said, well, let's talk to Michael. And it was Michael who brought, the perspective and especially the passion to the subject matter that you said to us, why don't you guys go back, put this in a 3-act structure and then you guys take it from there.
Well, go ahead.
Well, what happened was we ended up, 3 of us had a conversation. And I remember I was outside in my house under the Hollywood sign at night.
You don't have that house anymore. Your wife's got that house, right?
We ended up
Everybody
talking about the story. And the more I drew Michael out of talking about it, Jim and Michael started saying, well, that's good. Let's write more about that. And a bigger story started emerging. And the next draft I got from you guys was night and day, more interesting, more complex, more detailed, and told a story that was worth reading. It wasn't just about an actor getting fired or not getting a part in a movie. It was a portrait of Stanley Kubrick and sadism and what an actor goes through. Perhaps on every movie, there's sort of
not
torture
like this,
and the next step was, after going through another draft with the 2 of you, how do we get this thing published?
Right.
And I knew someone at the Hollywood Reporter and figured this is an article or this is a piece that is so specific, the best and widest audience for your article would be the Hollywood Reporter.
What you told me was you were going to send it to, your publishing agents in New York. And the next thing I know, almost like the next day, you called me up and said, hey, there's an editor at the Hollywood Reporter who's going to call you up about that story. It didn't even get to your publishing agents in New York. It never even got that far. As soon as you sent it over to Matt Bellany at the Hollywood Reporter,
it was so good. It was so good that they wanted it. They wanted it. And usually the first offer is the best offer.
Yeah.
And so it got published. And I believe when it got published, it was widely read. It was, talked about. And,
it was a featured article.
What happened? Yeah. Was it nominated for an award in the end?
It won.
It was nominated. Yeah, it got an award from the LA Press Club.
That's right.
For a feature, yeah.
Right. I mean, so since then,
it had a great title. It was titled "He Had a Look of Death on His Face."
That was
that was an eye grabber of a title for sure.
Yeah.
And that was 5 years ago. 5 years ago this month, in fact. It was in September.
Do you know why Jim knows this information? Why is it exactly 5 years ago, like this to this day? Because tomorrow Jim's going in for his colonoscopy, and it was 5 years ago that he was. I was on the phone with him the night before, saying, "You can do this. I'm with you. I'm not there with you, but I'm there with you in spirit." And it's
at the start of the podcast, at the start today, I heard you talk to Adam about brought some donuts with him, and I'm looking at green jello.
In the immortal lines of Moonstruck, somebody tell a joke.
Somebody tell it.
who else have you you told me one successful story. Is there an opposite side to that where you've read, and there must be 30 years you're going to make some mistakes. I made a mistake once on the set.
I
forgot my
some
line.
of the things that happy to say that I passed on The Matrix.
Yeah, what I would have passed on that too, because but I don't understand. I'm that guy, Adam. I need like a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I need to be able to understand it. It just when I
read The Matrix and I finished that script, I kept saying to myself, what does that look like? Neo enters the void. I mean, this was very out there in terms of what was on the page.
Who wrote that? Do you remember?
The Wachowski brothers.
Yeah.
And when I read that for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I went into his agent's office having read that was on.
Was that still Lou Pitt? Was he with Lou Pitt?
No, he had left Lou Pitt and had gone over to William Morris.
Oh, really?
He left his longtime agent Lou Pitt, and he's a new client, and he's offered The Matrix, and Robert Stein, his agent, and I had read this. For Arnold, and I passed on it, but I said to him, Arnold is age inappropriate for Neo. He's too old. He can't be Neo. Can't be the one. And the agent said, Adam,
right?
Warner Brothers is not offering Arnold Neo. I said, what do you mean? They're offering the part of Morpheus. I said, Morpheus, the guy who just stands there and delivers endless pages of purple dialogue and exposition? No way. Moreover, what is the script going to look like? I had no idea what it was going to look like. And so for me, when I passed on The Matrix, it wasn't that Arnold was, wrong to play Neo. I just didn't get it. I didn't see from the script what it would become. Now, the fact that it worked and that I was, wrong, no one bats 1,000 in Major League Baseball.
Of course.
Batting average. Ty Cobb is 367.
Right.
That's the highest batting average in the history of baseball.
I didn't understand The Usual Suspects and didn't meet on that just because.
Well, that was another script, Michael, where a reader walked into my office in the store department and said, oh my God, I just read the script called Usual Suspects, and in the end, Kaiser Soze. And so he told me the ending of The Usual Suspects. My favorite story is that Jim Anderson, new reader.
Who?
Jim Anderson, my favorite reader. I give him a script to read. I said, Jim, this script came in. It's for Bruce Willis. It's an offer. You got to read it by tomorrow. I need you to do coverage on it. Jim came in, took the script, did the coverage, came in the next day, hair on fire.
Bonfire of the Vanities?
No. He says to me, I just read the best script for Bruce Willis, and in the end, he's a ghost.
Oh, Jim, you did that?
Adam called me up and he said, hey, Jim, I have an overnight. It's kind of important. It's for Bruce Willis. Disney paid $2 million for this script. They're going to let the guy who wrote it, directed it. He only did one other thing nobody knows of before. So can you come pick this up? So I went and picked it up. And I went home and I read it. And it had me fooled. But I had read 10 years earlier that Jacob's Ladder, which has a similar kind of gimmick to it,
Yeah, Adrian Lyne,
yes, and Matt Craven is in that. Our friend Matt,
and Tim Robbins, our old friend Tim Robbins,
and Tim, yeah, exactly. So I had read that, and I read Sixth Sense, and had the same, kind of gimmicky ending to it, but it really worked. I mean, that script had me fooled. It was just a flawlessly written script. But what you see in that movie was on the page when I read it. So I wrote really good coverage of it, and I took it back to Adam and said, this is worth doing. Bruce should do this. And I got
and then Adam, do you turn around and read it again, or do you just like?
Oh no, no. You just I had in the 90s and in the 2000s. I was a player manager of the best story department in the movie business. I looked at my readers like the 1927 Yankees, Murderers Row.
Right.
I had brilliant readers, and I had...
How many?
10 to 15 on average.
Wow.
But they were sort of a mix of, people who I would interview, and they say, I went to Harvard Law School, I want to be in the movie business. I said, great, you went to Harvard Law School, here's a script to cover. And I'd look at the coverage that they wrote, and it didn't matter that they went to Harvard Law School. They did not know how to read a screenplay.
Yeah.
So I had people who knew how to read a screenplay, who could write in a way that agents would appreciate their point of view. And then I had an older crowd. If I had an interview with somebody like Jim, who was smarter than me, had read 10,000 screenplays.
Well, and I had worked at ICM, at Paramount, at HBO.
Totally overqualified.
Weintraub. I had
Jim
a lot of
Anderson in my
background
office is
developing
overqualified
material.
to start with. So I hired him as he entered the door. To have Jim Anderson be reading scripts for William Morris was like I'm getting Babe Ruth.
But you had people with similar backgrounds. You told me you always hired anybody who came from Scott Rudin's company because
I loved
they knew
hiring.
what they were doing.
Yeah, I hired Scott Rudin refugees. Scott Rudin fired somebody. Inevitably, an agent would say, "I'm sending you this assistant or this reader."
Anybody who worked for Scott Rudin, I'm sure, would just love working for you afterwards.
They were so smart.
Refugee
They were
is
so
the word
smart.
to
Go
use.
ahead. Go ahead.
I loved having these Scott Rudin refugees.
Yeah.
And I would hire them, and sometimes they would go on and sell a script. I had a reader named David Dorfman who was so tough that if David liked the script, it had to be an Oscar winner, you know. And back then, before emails, it was physical scripts in a box with your initials on it and stacks of scripts. And you came in and you logged them out and you logged them back in. And I'm reading Variety one morning, and it says...
You still read Variety every morning?
No. But this was in the 90s.
Yeah, okay.
In the
I'm just
90s, and the
wondering.
headline says, ex-WMA script reader David Dorfman sells script for $800,000 to New Line, called My Boss's Daughter. And I see this, and this is how I find out that, you know, he's left his position. So he comes in later that day, and in his box are 10 scripts for David Dorfman. They're all marked overnight. And David looks at this box and he carries him into my office. He goes, "Adam, I can't read for you anymore. I got this meeting tomorrow at Columbia with all these executives." And I said, "David, go back to your box." He goes back to the box, and he comes into my office, and there's a bottle of champagne behind the scripts, which he missed.
Okay.
It was a bottle of champagne, and written on the label in a Sharpie was "You're fired."
Good for you. Yeah.
And then David Dorfman wrote Anger Management.
Oh.
And David Dorfman wrote Anger Management. And my assistant created Nurse Jackie.
Wow.
And
Wow. Yeah.
number of assistants have, you know.
He had one reader who published a book, a screenwriting manual called "How to Get Your Screenplay Past a Reader."
No, Jennifer Lurtz wrote the definitive screenwriting book called 500 Ways to Beat the Hollywood Reader. And she started with a proposal of 50.
You must not like that title very much, but
No, you want to beat the reader. If you can beat the reader, then you deserve to be read.
Yeah, you're
beat the
strictly gonna
reader.
go
I
somewhere.
get it.
You want to beat the reader.
Okay, you
We're
want
the
the reader to
gatekeepers.
say, "Yeah, I love it."
No, totally.
Okay.
And what she did in that book, again, I loved. What I learned was that if we're gonna move the needle for people in the store department professionally, Jennifer Lurch had written on spec on her own a manuscript of how to beat the 500 ways to beat the Hollywood reader, and I sent the manuscript to an agent in New York, and with enough of a enthusiasm for her to submit it to HarperCollins. And the first and only publisher, 500 Ways to Beat the Hollywood Reader, they bought it. And it's an evergreen title. It's just endlessly in bookstores and Amazon. And it's one of these books that people, know to
I
get.
think that everybody in Hollywood has read it because everybody I meet in Hollywood has got a screenplay, whether they're in the business or not. My brother in Arizona has got a screenplay that he wants to get made.
Is that right? Is that
Well,
right?
Jim. I mean, come on.
I had a clerk at Safeway one time pull one out from under the counter. When he saw that I had a couple of screenplays, and I told him I was working at Paramount, he said, "Oh, well, here, let me show you mine."
I was thinking earlier about the stuff that you were talking about with the exposition and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, it's always this big story about Jim Cameron meeting Arnold for the first time and Lou Pitt sending him over there to play Kyle Reese, which is the character that I played. Well, Kyle Reese, if nothing else, is like the king of exposition in that movie. He's got to tell the audience through her who she is, who I am, who the
How the whole thing
Terminator
works.
is,
Yeah,
what the
yeah.
future is. I mean, it's exposition, and Cameron was brilliant enough to put that stuff in a bunch of car chases and
Action sequences.
But the idea of people like saying, well, Arnold was up for the idea of Arnold playing that character and delivering all of that exposition and all of that story is just so absurd that but it's I've read recently. 10 years ago, I used to sort of think, well, kind of what they write about me is right. Kind of what they, write is. I read an article recently, Jim, and it was on, it's probably on me because my phone knows what I like to read and, of course, sends me everything that is,
Everything about you.
But anyway, half the article was about how Lauren Bacall was my mentor. And Lauren Bacall, I did a movie with her.
You treasured your relationship with Lauren, didn't you?
Yeah, Lauren Bacall was always the most difficult person I had ever worked with, and it was a first-time director, and they changed the script around on her, and Brian De Palma made something that made a lot of money, and they turned it into a slasher movie. But she was. She was difficult. She was really, really difficult. But I was young. I didn't know any better. So you love your job, huh? Oh, and by the way, I was driving around Beverly Hills last night because I was with my son and his girlfriend, and we're driving through Beverly Hills looking at the houses, and we went by Wilshire. And I said, I know, and they were talking about prices because they live in Bristol in England, and they were talking about how expensive it is in Bristol, not even London, but in Bristol. And I said, you're looking at houses here because I know that you just rented. I said, you're looking at houses here that cost, $5,000 a month to rent. And so you recently got divorced. Is that correct? Yeah.
Somebody tell a joke.
You tell a joke. Please tell me a joke.
What's the story? What's your favorite story about when Ed L'Amato got a call from Tim Burton? What's that story?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, you're represented by Ed L'Amato.
I'm represented by Ed L'Amato.
You're auditioning at Warner Brothers.
I'm not auditioning at that time. You know what happened to me, Adam, is that after the Terminator. Of course, he cast another guy in Aliens, and I just went in and replaced him, James Remar. Didn't read for The Abyss, didn't read for Tombstone. I went for a period after the Terminator up until I did a movie called Clock Stoppers for Paramount. That was 17 years, and during that period of time, I might have auditioned for one or two things, but I quit reading. Anyway, I went in and met Tim Burton over at Warner Brothers, and back in those days, they were just meetings. They weren't auditions. I would just go in to meet, but I was very good at telling people how good I was going to be in this role and how I was going to play it, and I was going to do this and I was going to do that, and sometimes some of the dialogue would slip in, and I've done that many times, and so I did that with Tim Burton, and Tim Burton I guess liked me quite a bit, and this was for Batman. This was for the original Batman. So Tim Burton had me in again, and it was an important enough meeting that L'Amato came with me. Ed L'Amato came over there with me at Warner Brothers. And we sat and we talked to Tim Burton for about an hour, and of course he ended up casting Michael Keaton in that role and Jack Nicholson. But L'Amato told me that that he had two choices, and it was either that choice or me and Robin Williams. Robin Williams played the Joker. And that he was like making up his mind about that. Went with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. Obviously.
Can I tell you, I prefer your scenario.
Why?
You and Robin Williams.
Why?
Would have been extraordinary. As good as Keaton Nicholson was, maybe one for the ages. With that duo, you as Bruce Wayne. unbeatable. Robin Williams as the Joker, unbeatable. The two of you in that scenario, it's there's no loser's choice. Either one would have been great, but to know that was sort of in the mix.
Well, that's
in
what
the
it came
cards,
down to.
fantastic.
Well, here's the thing too is Adam, I didn't know who Tim Burton was. I didn't fucking Batman. I didn't care. I didn't, I just went on to the next thing, and I didn't, and it seems like everybody who's ever played Batman has always bitched and moaned and groaned about how fucking difficult it was to play Batman and the suit and the whole thing. Although The Batman, the movie The Batman, did you see it?
Yeah.
I fucking love that movie.
Yeah.
I thought that was extremely, extremely well done. Yeah. I like that one a lot. And my creditor's calling me on my telephone. Anyway, that's the only time I ever met Tim Burton, and that would have been, I guess it would have been interesting. But what's happened with me, Adam, is that I've had a career. I was in the business for 84, 70, almost 10 years, and making money and taking care of myself after about 2 years of getting here. So 8 years of making money and having a career before I got the Terminator. Mm-hmm. I thought I was like wildly successful. Getting a commercial. I had no expectation. Getting the Screen Actors Guild card, getting a modeling job where I was flown up to Monterey or Pebble Beach, and taking pictures of like swimsuit stuff and have that ad show up in Playboy magazine. I came from a small town in Nebraska, and this was just like, oh my God, this is like, I run home with the Playboy and show my parents, and I get in the Screen Actors Guild, and like, I always knew I did date a girl that's father worked at MGM. He was a big publicity guy. His name was Richard. I forget the last name.
Her sister worked at William Morris.
Do you remember the last name?
Yeah, Con.
Yeah.
And her sister Lisa worked at William Morris for a while. You and I went on a double date with them to see The Goodbye Girl. I remember
with Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
Dreyfuss at that time he won the Academy Award for that, and then he was written up in Rolling Stone in that. And I remember a quote of his because I know Richard now, and Richard, here's one of the greatest compliments I ever got. Okay, as an actor. Okay, I'm at a signing autographs, and I'm just sitting there signing autographs, and like I get this like Michael, like a tap on my shoulder. Michael, usually, like I'm sitting behind something, and Michael, I turn around, it's fucking Dreyfuss. I'm like, Richard Dreyfuss. He goes, how'd you do it? You gotta tell you, he's got that energy. How'd you do it? Tell me, where did that come from? Michael, I gotta know where that came from. Please tell me, where did that come from? I'm like, what are you talking about? Tombstone, Johnny Ringo. My God, what a performance! And it's coming from Richard Dreyfuss, and that was probably one of the best compliments that I've ever had in my life. And he truly wanted to know where that came from. And as I told him, and as I tell everybody about that movie, which was a very troubled movie, it was just written so well. And other characters talked about Johnny Ringo. He's the fastest gun in the West. God knows what's going to happen when he takes over this group. What makes a man like him? He was born with a hole in his heart, he was born. And all the other characters are talking about Johnny Ringo. And, Johnny Ringo, I didn't have to do much, man.
Badass pistolero.
Yeah. I've had, for me, Adam, it's been like just... If somebody had told me, and I might have said this on the podcast before, but if somebody had told me that I could make, when I first came over there, that I could be on a soap opera for 20 years and make $100,000 a year, I would have sold my soul for that. I would have sold my soul for that. And
That would have been success.
oh well, it was success when I was doing when I was making, $40,000 or $50,000 and living on my own at 22 or 3 as an actor. Oh, I was that was success at that time.
Sure.
It again, if I would have gotten the Batman thing, I had enough trouble dealing with the amount of success that I had, which was a very kind of slow burn that kind of went upwards. And people didn't appreciate the Terminator. Adam, nobody. I mean, people. Maybe somebody like you who read it, maybe agents, and studio people knew Jim's talent. They wanted him to write and so on and so forth. That movie came out, and it was 24th in the year 1984, box office wise. And Tombstone, I looked up recently, was like 74th or 75th. Tombstone's a movie that like nobody cared about. Tombstone. New York Times just killed it, and
there's probably greater awareness of it now than when it came out.
Oh,
because you can't miss it on television these days.
Oh,
you can't go a week without it showing up on some cable network or another.
No, I know. My point is that movie, and there are a lot of movies like this, and you know this. You've been in the business a long time. You could probably know as many as I do. But that movie came out. Didn't get good reviews. Val didn't get nominated. Nobody gave a shit about it. In my book, it didn't make any money. Maybe Andy Vanya sold it overseas, and it was doing okay. But I went and I looked, because do I read my own reviews? Fuck yes. Yes, I do. And I never really get reviews. They always... Nobody ever says anything bad about me, but nobody ever says anything like that great about me either. Terminator... And Tombstone, I went to the LA Times, the Hollywood Reporter, the Variety, the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle. I fucking found them all, And not only were the reviews not that great for the movie, nobody even fucking mentioned my name. Nobody mentioned my name. Now, 32 years later, people love that movie, Adam. People love it. And so it's like, and the Terminator made lots and lots of money on VHS. That's where everybody saw Terminator, was on VHS. And then T2 came out, and that turned it into a completely different deal. But that's been a really, really slow burn. So now when I sign autographs for people, I've got a picture of the Terminator, I've got a picture of Aliens, I got a picture of Tombstone, I got a picture of The Rock, which people like, and one or two others. And more likely than Aliens, which is the best movie I think I've ever been in. Aliens to me is the best movie I've ever been in. Or Terminator, people want Tombstone. And they want to talk about Tombstone. And just recently, Jim and I have written extensively about Tombstone, and we love Tombstone and talking about Tombstone. Something just came out, Jim, like a week ago about Wyatt fucking Earp, and
on Netflix they have a thing called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War. I watched the first episode of it, and
so tired of hearing about
Wyatt the Hero,
Wyatt the Hero, Wyatt the fearless
lawman,
and
sticking up for law and order.
And it might be just because I'm I was a cowboy, but the more you learn about Wyatt Earp,
Well, you and I wound up. I've got 15 books about Tombstone and Wyatt Earp on my bookshelf. The more you look into it,
history's catching up to him.
History,
Recently I did a movie for Shannon the Macintosh, and Shannon is Quentin Tarantino's producer. She's produced The Hateful Eight, and she produced Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We had her on. She was the last one we did. We had her on, and Jeff Fahey, who she had worked with. So I worked with her recently. Why was I bringing her up? What were we talking about?
Westerns.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it could be. She kind of hinted, Kaylin, maybe you would know this or not, or maybe
She's
you
got
remember.
like a line of westerns kind of in
she
production.
She said she got a slate of them coming.
Yeah, she said she's mentioned that she was doing. I shot a thing over there, Adam, over in Thailand.
Adam just saw it, or saw the trailer for it and was talking about it. What did you see, Adam?
Shot it in 20 days, 21 days in Bangkok. Production value was incredible. And, when you're shooting in Bangkok, it's Bangkok. It's hard to shoot Bangkok in New Mexico, and it was, really well done, and the kids are good in it. But I wanted to go to her because she mentioned on the podcast something about Westerns. And for once, one time, I want somebody to just tell the story from a different perspective than Wyatt fucking Earp's story, because he's been lying, and the books up until we did Tombstone, all the movies, all the television shows, they've been lying about Wyatt Earp and who he was and what a big hero he was, and how bad the Cowboys were, and how bad Ike Clanton was, and the shootout at OK Corral was a real gunfight. It wasn't a gunfight; it was murder. But anyway, you've heard all this before.
Well, there have been a whole lot of books published about that after the movie. The movie spurred a whole school of research into it. So the more recently published books do paint a different picture of Wyatt Earp, and like I said, this Netflix series is.
Were you aware of Kevin Jarre? Did you know him as a writer?
I read him.
Yeah.
Because he was Jim Crabb's client.
Okay.
So,
so he was William
very
Moore's client.
Fine writer.
Yeah. Did you read Glory? You remember reading Glory?
Before my time.
Was it before your time? Okay.
I wasn't reading scripts around Glory, but after I would read Kevin scripts. Whenever his agent, who I read for all the
I
time.
covered The Jackal for you guys. He did a pass on that Bruce Willis movie, The Jackal.
Yeah.
Remember, which was kind of a remake of Day of the Jackal.
Yeah. Actually, Jim was, after he recommended Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, he was Bruce Willis's reader. I mean, then he's reading The Jackal for Bruce Willis, which got made with him and Richard Gere.
Yes.
And the thing about being a reader is that you read something and you're playing a small part in the process. And then a year later, you're on Sunset Boulevard and you see a billboard or a bus stop of a script that you read for Bruce Willis, and a sense of ownership in what we do, a small part, critical part, is the joy of being in the movie business.
I get a kick out of telling people that I read The Sixth Sense and recommended it for Bruce Willis, and I got $60 for it. He did the movie. He got $60 million ultimately, and I'm happy with my $60. I read a good script. It wasn't a wasted effort at all. And I'm happy the movie turned out as good as it did because I recommended it. So, but that's the business for sure.
Yeah. So do you see there's more content out there. There's more stuff to read right now than there was years ago, isn't there? Because of all the different platforms? Isn't there more content and isn't it like, can it be overwhelming when you have from an agency standpoint, not just you personally, but from an agency standpoint, when you have Netflix and you've got the Paramount Channel and you've got like all these offers and coming and going, I would think that the reading the scripts, getting the good ones to the right people at the right time would be more difficult now than it would have been even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, from just an agency standpoint. Not from, I'm sure that you were always busy, but there just seems to be so much content now. Everybody's working.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed, yeah.
It's still another tour of Vietnam. And if you've done 3 tours in Vietnam and you go back to a 4th tour in Vietnam, the landscape is not unfamiliar.
What's your favorite Vietnam movie?
I just saw The Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
At the Silent Movie Theater in Fairfax.
Was that a silent movie?
Well, it's a theater. And I go see that movie, and I hadn't seen it in decades. And my friend looked over at me at the end of the movie where Meryl Streep's second movie.
Was her first one Kramer versus Kramer?
No, that was the third movie.
Okay.
First movie, I think, was Julia.
Oh.
And so I'm watching the end of The Deer Hunter.
She was in Manhattan.
At the end of the
Woody
movie,
Allen.
I am crying my eyes out.
Deer
That's the
Hunter.
title,
Deer Hunter. Is Cimino? Is that Cimino?
That was Cimino.
Yeah.
And I'm crying my eyes out at this movie. It's almost 50 years old, 40 years old. And as much as it's about
50 or 40?
40. It's 40. And since you asked that, I saw Platoon at film school when Oliver Stone presented it and did a Q&A afterwards. So the two Vietnam movies, probably Deer Hunter and Platoon. Maybe there's others that can join the pantheon, but Deer Hunter blew me away.
Yeah,
I saw Apocalypse Now in the front row of Cinerama Dome the day it opened, and that one really had an impact on me for sure. So that would have probably been my first.
And then
response,
I saw Born on the 4th of July at the Dome. But what I remember about seeing Born on the 4th of July at the Dome was it was so crowded. I saw that movie in the front row.
Yeah, exactly.
You do not want to see Born on the 4th of July.
Who directed?
That was Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone. Yeah, Oliver Stone. I don't know. It's almost like in the cosmos or something. Something's always like wrong with Oliver Stone and I's relationship. We don't have a relationship, but the very first time I met him for El Salvador. And I went in to talk to him, to pitch him or whatever. And he was fucking high, man. He was so fucking high. He could, he left the room 15 times, during our, 30-minute conversation, or maybe it was a 45-minute conversation about playing the photographer in the movie. And, it's a good movie, and I'll think of the name of the actor that played the
James Woods.
No, not James Woods, not the photographer. The
James Belushi?
No,
was it James
no,
Belushi?
it's the guy that Jennifer did the series with.
I know who you mean.
Him and Jimmy Woods played the two guys. Remember the two cops who beat that?
Yeah.
Remember Jimmy Woods in the movie with him, and they played two cops, and he beat his baby. He got frustrated and punched his baby. Anyway, I'm in a meeting with him, and he's just so fucking high, and I was like, I didn't even know what to think. And he kind of like, after I pitched him on what I thought was like, this is the way that I would do it. I wouldn't say that he dressed me down, but he basically said, no, you got it all wrong, It's not about taking pictures. It's about the fucking adrenaline rush you get when you're out there, fucking, the bullets flying and this and that and all that, and, I walked out of his office kind of thinking like, fucking asshole, man, but now I realize he was no matter how high he was, he was absolutely right. That's why guys go back on 1 tour, 2 tours, 3 tours. That's why photographers, and that's why people. That's why they do it. And then I met him on a movie that they never made somewhat recently called Pinkville. Pinkville?
Yeah.
Pinkville?
I read that.
Did you like it?
That was by Mi Lai, right?
Yes, yeah.
I don't remember. I wasn't crazy about it.
Yeah, well, he had it set up at one point. So I think kind of set up. And I know he was trying to get to Josh Brolin.
It's amazing that I read it. I mean, you bring up Pinkville, and I go, yeah.
Yeah, you seem to have read, anything that's kind of close to being...
like that, I probably
very likely,
would have read it.
Yeah.
So, yes, I read Pinkville, and not surprisingly, Oliver Stone would want to tell that story too.
Yeah.
It's just an obsession there.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of an anti-American, kind of a downer, kind of like, I'm not sure who the hero was. Oh, it was the guy was up in the helicopter that was... Do you remember Jim, the guy?
Yeah, well, I remember the trial afterward. William Calley was the lieutenant on the ground. I think the guy up in the helicopter. Well, there was
Callie was the one who got all the shit dumped on him,
and a guy named Medina.
Medina got off.
Two officers who, well, they all got off basically.
He did. You're right. And
I mean, Callie had like house arrest on some military
for a
base,
short period of time, and then he got
pardoned. Or
who pardoned him?
I think it was Nixon.
Yeah,
I believe, but he never really faced any consequences for it. But I'm not surprised.
One of my favorite movies, All the President's Men. I fucking love that movie, man. Love it. I a lot of times I'll put on a movie to go to sleep, and I'll put on All the President's Men. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, that's William Goldman at his best, right there.
Oh, that's William Goldman. Who are some of the hot people that are out there right now from a writing standpoint that you see that maybe are somebody like I wouldn't be aware of? I'm not really, or maybe even Jim might not be aware of, because I don't really pay attention to writers. I pay attention to their scripts, and I look at the scripts, and are there people out there that you're looking at that are kind of like watch these guys, or this or that?
I think for me, it's more if there's a recognizable name. I have old favorites, and I can never forget a face. A writer. And so if I see a script, and for example, on the title page, it says written by Billy Ray, I instantly sit up, take a breath, and say, I'm about to read a Billy Ray screenplay. And Billy Ray, whatever he writes, for me, is just a crisply written, totally engaging, one of my favorite screenwriters, no matter what he does. And
what's he written?
Well, a lot of things that I've read have been rewrites. He's a guy who they hired to do a rewrite, so I see them as a produced writer. He did the Atlanta bombing movie.
Oh, that was the one that Eastwood directed.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good movie. That was a good movie. And
he's done things. That script that Billy Ray wrote that I'm talking about was originally going to be Leonardo DiCaprio and Jonah Hill.
Okay.
And that didn't happen.
And it
ended up being something else entirely. So Billy Ray is just an example of a screenwriter who, when I falls into my inbox for an email, I get excited about. But to me, it's always just about the script that I'm reading at the moment, and what do I do with it? What do I say about it when I'm done reading it? And it's worth championing and reading it, and someone else should read it. So
I got a script to read a couple of years ago, and I asked Adam if he knew about it, and it was written by a fellow named Wes Took. And Adam said, "Oh yeah, he is a real pro," and he kind of outlined for me, what this fellow had written before. So I know there are.
That's another guy. That's another guy. I love Wes Took. Wes Took will like Billy Ray. There's so many screenwriters out there. There's too many.
Yeah, it was just announced in the trades that Michael B. Jordan is doing a remake of
Thomas Crown
Affair, and Wes Took did a draft of that. For it was in the trades that Wes Took had done a draft of that. So he's like a real veteran pro. And like Adam said, you see his name on the script. You see a name like that on the script, and you think, oh, good, this is going to be worth reading.
Talk about your writing a little bit, and what you're writing, your books, and I had a hard time. Adam, I had the last, I had on Jeff Fahey and
Shannon McIntosh.
Thank you, Jim. Shannon McIntosh. And I kind of had to do like research on both of them. And that was like a week ago today. And then I'm like, okay, I've got you. And I said, Jim, send me Adam's book or one of his books, one of the things. And he was trying to send me Rat Park, okay? And what he did send me was something that I didn't know. It's the name of your book, Rat Park. Was the sort of experiments that they used to do with the rats, and they would give it a chance to
where the title comes from,
yeah, what title of Adam's book comes from, but is based on these experiments where a rat was given a choice between drinking water and drinking water with cocaine or heroin in it or something like that, and the rat would go over to the heroin. And for 30 or 40 years, people have thought like, well, yeah, once you get addicted, once you get, and it turned out, it turned out, once you get addicted, you're done. Like you shoot heroin for a month, and once you do that, you're addicted. You can't, whatever. And I learned just by research. I never got a chance to read the book because we had a hard time downloading all this kind of stuff. But I learned just from your title a lot about the new way of thinking about addiction, and the fact that if you take the same rat and you give him the same thing of water and you give him the same thing of cocaine and or heroin, but you put other rats inside with him, and girls that they can fuck each other, and then like toys that they can play around on, and feed them cheese all day long, they'll drink the water. They'll drink the water, and so the whole.
Why don't you tell a little bit of the backstory about how you even first learned of that experiment, Adam, when you were writing the book? Because that wasn't the title you were using for most of the time you were writing that book. So
well, the novel you're talking about, Rat Park,
is your last one. Yeah,
it's my fourth novel.
Fourth one.
It's my best novel,
mm-hmm.
And the novel is about addiction. It's also a love story. It's also about marriage. What I also recognized was that I wanted to do a love story about addiction that would remind people of leaving Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And what that novel meant to me was because 30 years ago,
Mike Figgis,
the novelist of Leaving Las Vegas, had an agent at William Morris.
That was a novel before
it was Nicolas Cage's movie. It was
Mike Figgis directed that?
Mike Figgis directed.
Yeah, okay.
I actually read the script.
I met him for
Leaving
it.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was always inspired by Leaving Las Vegas, the novel, because I knew John O'Brien. John O'Brien was a terrible alcoholic, and he wrote this novel called Leaving Las Vegas about an alcoholic who goes to Las Vegas to drink himself to death and meets a prostitute. And instead of the John trying to save the hooker, it's about the hooker who tries to save the John. And O'Brien was given to me as a client by his agent, who he met at a dinner party, and said, this guy needs money. He's a really good writer. You teach him how to write screenplays so he can maybe make a living as a screenwriter and continue to write novels. So I knew John O'Brien briefly in like 1991 or so, and he had this idea about a female alcoholic, and Laura Ziskin, the producer at the time, gave him $25,000 to write a screenplay, and I read a couple drafts of The Rest of Jackie, and he turned it in, and he had this novel that got published. So 30 years later, I'm on my fourth novel, and I'm writing this love story about an agent who falls in love with a civilian, a school teacher.
And anybody who's not an agent would be a civilian. Is that?
Well, anyone who's not in the movie business, we can call them civilians. Again,
non-pro.
Continuing the Vietnam analogy.
Yes.
Are you a soldier or are you a civilian?
Yes. Okay.
And so here's this agent who falls in love with a civilian, a school teacher.
Yep.
And as soon as I caught on to that, I said, okay, I'm going to really challenge myself to write a love story for the ages. I mean, I was shooting for Titanic. I'm shooting for Leaving Las Vegas. Terminator. I just want to write a believable love story. And the problem that is facing the agent is that this agent is dealing with sex addiction. And because he is...
I've always thought I might have that.
Because he is dealing with this, how do you approach addiction? Well, he has a mandatory therapist. And so he is now in therapy, and I wanted to write those chapters of the agent with his therapist to be as good as the therapist scenes from Ordinary People, where Judd Hirsch and Tim Hutton have their scenes. I wanted their scenes to be as powerful as Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams and Matt Damon are talking about stuff.
Yeah.
And in this case, I heard a story, and I put this in Rat Park, where an old story about an agent, a William Morris agent, who was such a ladies' man that he was, screwing everything that had a pulse in Los Angeles, and he finally meets this woman and falls in love with her, and he thinks he's going to marry this woman, give up his promiscuous ways, and he's also seeing a therapist, and the therapist knows everything about this guy, what he does, and prostitutes, and just constantly goes out, has these one-night stands. And when he meets this woman he's fallen in love with, she says, you got to meet my parents. I want you to meet my parents. So they go to Woodland Hills, and this agent opens the door, and her father is his therapist, who knows everything about this guy. And this patient is going to marry his daughter. So I said, I'm putting that in Rat Park.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this a story about an agent who falls in love with a civilian, a school teacher, and everything he tells the shrink in their therapy session is going to build up to when they all meet together at Genghis Cohen on Fairfax for a big get-together.
Yeah.
And that chapter where the shrink meets his daughter's future husband turns out to be this sex-crazed madman was both the hardest and most fun chapter, every bit of writing I ever had to do. But the point is, I did not know how to write these therapy scenes between Lester Bonds, the agent, and the shrink. So I would just stare at the computer, had no idea, all these false starts, and I knew I wanted this was really important to the novel that I get this right.
Yeah.
And so I go to a dinner party, and dinner party, you're supposed to talk to the woman on your right. In this case, I was the gentleman on my left. We start talking. We don't know anybody at this dinner party. And he says he's a professor of psychology at Cal State Northridge. I go, oh, my God.
Yeah.
I said, I'm writing this novel. Can you give me some advice about addiction? I want to write a scene, chapters with this therapist. And he goes, oh, you got to write about Rat Park. And I said, what's Rat Park? And he said, well, Rat Park is this experiment they did in the 70s where they believed that hard drugs was so prevalent and addiction was so terrible that prison sentences, if you were caught with heroin, you go to prison. And so these scientists did an experiment where they believed that if you took 12 rats and you put them in solitary confinement and they had to choose between water and water that was spiked with heroin, and another 12 rats who were in a park with a Ferris wheel and females and fun things to do. Would they drink the cheese? Would they drink the heroin? Or would they drink the water? And what they discovered was that all 12 rats in the solitary confinement died. They overdosed. They just drank the heroin water. And yet the 12 rats in the park avoided the heroin water and only drank the regular water, which made the people wonder, well, is it the hard drugs that is addictive, or is it your environment? Is it connections? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so once I hit upon this from this random dinner party, Michael, I was off to the races. The hardest thing about writing is not knowing what to write. Once I knew I had Rat Park, I give credit to Jim Anderson for telling me, you got to call your novel Rat Park now. Yeah, and so very late in the game, I changed the title to Rat Park, and Jim was right. And so when I finished writing these scenes with the therapist and all the talk about Rat Park, the therapist says to Lester Bonds at the end of the session, because he knows he's going on a date, and he says to him, lose the cage, find your park. So lose the cage, find your park became my sort of mantra in writing this novel. By the time I was done, and it got published by this tiny publisher in Cleveland, and I've never been prouder of anything I've done in my entire life. I don't have children. I have a twin brother who has 3 kids, and I said to my parents once, "You guys are so lucky," and they said, "We are," and I said, "Yeah, you have 3 grandkids and 4 novels."
Oh, you got a 5th on the way. You're preggers, aren't you? With a 5th novel now too.
We are at about an hour 20, which is about how long I like these to last.
I wanted to just jump in before you wrap up. It's a very broad question, but is there any advice that you could give to screenwriters? Like, what really makes a good script as a script reader? What really draws you in? How, they say the first 10 pages, if you don't get in, then you throw it out. Is there what makes such a great script, and what gets those scripts past those 10 pages, and any kind of advice you would give to the screenwriters out there?
What's the point of having all this knowledge if I can't share it?
Yeah, there you go. Thanks,
and I think that's the thought is this. If I tell my readers what to look for, it's the same advice I would give to writers what to write, and which is, what's the idea? What's the idea of this script, of this movie? Truman Show. The guy wakes up and realizes his whole life is a TV show. When he tries to escape the show, he discovers his humanity in the process. What's interesting about Truman Show is that maybe the second most important thing is to write a lead that will hook a star. Good Will Hunting is about a character named Will Hunting. I always looked at that title on that script, one of my all-time top 5 screenplays, as a guy who was looking for goodwill. So, loaded title. Titles are important for sure. But when you have this idea and you've written a part that will hook a star, it's about someone, Will Hunting, Truman, you name it, to hook a star. You're not just writing a good script or a great script, you are increasing your chances of it getting made. Because once an actor or a star raises their hand because you've written a part that someone wants to play, that they wake up every day saying, okay, what am I going to bring? How am I going to play this? The third thing that I would recommend people to think about as you are telling the story and you start to think about the story is that a great screenplay is not a solo piece. A great screenplay is an orchestra. So you got to surround your lead with supporting characters around your lead who are interesting, who challenge your lead, who love your lead, who make your lead more interesting because they have great scenes with other characters. It is not a monologue. A screenplay is never a monologue. You can have monologues in there. So as I'm rattling off these state secrets, what's the idea? Write a part for a star. Surround your lead with interesting supporting characters. Actors win Oscars for Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress for a reason, because they're so memorable that you're creating a part for an actor to steal the whole movie. And maybe the last thing is the most important thing from a reader, for an actor, for a director, for anyone, is your dialogue. When you have great dialogue in any screenplay and you are bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. So if your dialogue is lifeless, I mean, I'm sorry, maybe you can sell it. But when you got a great exchange or a great scene and there's a rhythm and there's a line that's going in the trailer, that's powerful stuff to people to focus on. The idea, the lead.
Adam has a phrase he uses sometimes in his discussions of dialogue. Well, he'll say, and this screenplay features chewy dialogue.
Chewy dialogue.
Chewy
dialogue.
And I know what
Jim's right. Jim's right. If you can write chewy dialogue,
chewy dialogue, the actors can really get into this. They can chew on this. They can work on this. Yeah.
And then you're in the hands where I have seen screenplays be elevated by unexpected performances that you go, wow, look at that. I mean, there's all ways to take paper, and it's not just going to be paper. It's going to turn into this other form where actors are going to bring something to it. The director's going to bring to it. But if you focus on those things, these are the important things. The fifth thing is basically what you bring to the table, how you tell the story, your sentences, your voice. Voice is important only from the standpoint of the read. I'm reading the screenplay. I nice rhythm, nice flow. Oh, that's a line of a description. Makes you laugh. It's not something a director can shoot.
Right,
It's not something
right,
an actor
absolutely.
can say. It's literally on the page, but it ain't on the stage.
Yes.
That contributes to getting a reader pumped and excited to champion
On
the
your
work.
side,
Yeah.
championing your project.
I hope that answers your question.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And-
Go ahead, Jim. Were you going to say
And the
something?
best way to maybe supplement that is to go out and read screenplays of movies that you like. And just read screenplays. Screenplays are so available online these days. All you have to do is Google, whatever the name of the movie is. And there's almost certainly going to be a screenplay available somewhere online for it. So read those screenplays and you can kind of see what are the common features about these screenplays that cause them to get produced,
Well,
that bring them to the top of the pile.
let me just
And that's it.
let me just throw this in too, because I'm sure that you both appreciate it and you both know it. I know you do. But there was maybe it was Cohn, maybe it was is he the New York?
This one, what?
Cohn, the agent in New
Sam
York.
Cohn, that you were talking
Sam,
about?
I think it was
Yeah.
Sam Cohn. Sam Cohn, or maybe some studio executive years ago used to pick up a script. Here, read the script. You pick up the script and you just flip through it. You go and look at it. And if it was all dialogue, you just tossed it in the trash because there was no description. There wasn't the stuff that you were talking about that describe. You can't shoot it, but it describes. And if you look at Jim Cameron's scripts, he never writes longer than 3-page. You never see like a 5-page scene. You get like 3-page scenes, a whole bunch of description about how he wants the movie to look, and I think that's very important too. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All part of the read.
Yeah.
The experience,
Yeah,
beginning to end.
yeah,
And whatever you can throw into your script that is what I notice 2024, and this is totally generational, is writers now are inserting images onto the page. You got a character who loves blueberry pie. Turn the page, and there will be pictures of blueberries on the page.
really.
And when we see that, all that is sort of a Paisley,
Pocket,
pocket
yeah,
handkerchief.
handkerchief, yeah.
But if I was wearing a Paisley handkerchief, I'm not saying it's the whole ball game.
But it
But I am starting
catches
to
your
appreciate.
attention.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
starting
yeah.
to appreciate and recognize that writers are doing that. And I urge everyone to read the original screenplay of A Quiet Place by Beck and Woods. And these are the guys who they got rewritten by John Krasinski, who was sent their screenplay of A Quiet Place, which, if you remember, there's no dialogue, because if you speak and the aliens hear you, they kill you. So this was a 70-page screenplay that they wrote with this idea, which had a lead with a wife and kids, but no dialogue. And yet that idea attracted Paramount Pictures and Michael Bay and Platinum Dunes. The lead attracted John Krasinski. His wife, the supporting character, attracted Emily Blunt. And even though there was no dialogue in their first draft, John Krasinski had just directed 2 movies, and he sent A Quiet Place by his agent at William Morris. And he goes, I want to star in this, but I also want to direct it, and I want to rewrite the script. And what John Krasinski did with that Beck and Woods script was infuse it with maybe more depth, more detail, more dialogue. And the first thing he did in his script was he got rid of all this Paisley napkins that Beck and Woods had put in their script, these images in their script, and it began to look more and more like a shooting script. So the director did his rewrite, and A Quiet Place succeeded the way it did because of what John Krasinski did in his rewrite of Beckenwood's script. But the Beckenwood script was so original, even with the images that they've done, that's a great example for me of first getting your attention with a script that had a great idea and had some sizzle in its presentation, but it attracted a writer-director star who then took it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that should do it. Thank you so much for coming over, and and by the way, thank you, Kaylin, because you probably asked him the most important question that anybody who would be listening to this would really want to know. Basically, you can put up his credits, you can put up his books and stuff, and then just say cut to the last 10 minutes of the podcast.
Michael,
the rest of us is
like
just us
it's like a good therapy session. It's only at the very end, that we get down.
Yeah.
And then we get to say time's up.
All right. Well, thank you, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, we'll have you back for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I just want to say this. I want you to know this, and because I have no social media, you have no social media, and Jim has no social media. This, it's going to go out there, and you'll see the numbers, and you'll go like, oh, there's not very many people, because we're not the social media guys. So we'll have you back when we're more popular, and we've got like more people listening, and thank you.
When my followers are more than single digits.
Yes. Yeah. We'll have you back when we've got 10,000 followers.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And tell me, who might you let into your strange pecan shell? Which hand would you choose?